Did you know George Reeves was Superman even before The Adventures of Superman? Two Superman movie serials were made during the 40s, both starring Kirk Alyn. The third movie, slated for release in 1951, was to be the pilot for the series. According to reports, not only did Kirk Alyn not want to do television, he was holding out for more money. So he became a footnote in Superman history and George Reeves took his place. Today, not counting Man of Steel and beyond, the three actors best remembered for playing Superman are Dean Cain, Christopher Reeve, and George Reeves. Mention Kirk Alyn and folks will most likely say, who? The George Reeves series took advantage of American supernationalism and the whole McCarthy era thing. Thus, we are told that Superman is the
valiant defender of truth, justice, and the American way.
In 1951, the American way included fear of nuclear war, separate water fountains for white and black people, segregated schools, and most of all, everybody lived in terror that the commies were just around the corner waiting to get you. Oh, the baby boom was in full swing as all the lonely soldiers back from the war were making up for lost time. But in Washington, Joe McCarthy was making a name for himself, dragging people before his Committee on Un-American Activities and seeing communists around every corner. He called for America and freedom, except if you were a communist. No freedom for you. That's different, somehow. Anybody who was different was suspect. The white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, or WASP, way of life was firmly entrenched. Life was great, as long as you were in that category. If you weren't, fear and prejudice ruled the day. Into that scenario comes this film, not only a statement in itself, but the setup for what would become 6 seasons of one of the most popular shows of all time. And I know you've been waiting all this time for me to answer your question. Yes, we are going to review the series. But first, let's let George Reeves and Phyllis Coates introduce themselves to the Superman world. This establishing shot looks like it should be in a Norman Rockwell painting. Then again, maybe it is a Norman Rockwell painting. Oh, it's Silsby, home of the world's deepest oil well. Is that a good thing? We zoom in on said oil well, or what's left of it.
Two of the best Stilson wrenches ever made.
Toss them away.
And there goes a slow valve that ain't even hardly worn.
Get every piece of equipment in that hole and then bury it.
Well, what's the idea, Corrigan? This stuff costs money.
The idea is because I'm telling you to, and I'm responsible for it, not you.
Because these guys are in the process of dismantling it. Corrigan there takes a piece of equipment and hides it in a locked shed when nobody is looking. Then an executive arrives with 2 people in tow.
This is Miss Lane and Mr. Kent.
How do you...
Pop Shannon, best watchman in the oil field. Pop, these folks are going to do a feature story on the well.
Oh, newspaper reporters, huh?
That's right.
Well, I'm afraid you're a little bit late. They're just shutting her down.
That guy is the company's PR man, and he's the last to find out about stuff like this, after he's dragged a couple of reporters all the way from Metropolis, which we'll learn is 2,500 miles from here. Which direction, we don't need to know.
This is just ducky.
If they've shut down, there must be some reason. Was the well a duster?
This well? No, sir. We struck gas at 13.2, and where you strike gas, you look for oil.
That figures.
Well, it was a nice plane trip anyway. But wait till the chief hears about this. He'll blow his top.
Corrigan says, I made a report to the Home Office, and the next day the order came through to shut it down. He won't say what was in that report, and Clark quietly notices the equipment about to be buried. He says, there may be a story here after all. Let's keep poking around.
I think I'll drive out to the well.
What for?
Oh, nothing. Look around, maybe talk to the watchman.
Good idea. I'll go with you.
Now, Lois, what do you possibly expect to find out there this time of night?
What do you expect to find, Mr. Kent?
All right.
I expect to find man stuff like, I'll get the car keys. Out at the site, something weird is happening at the wellhead. They said that shaft is about 6 miles deep. Guess what? Somebody lives down there. They all keep calling it the center of the Earth, which means nobody's ever explained to them that the Earth's diameter is just a tad bigger than 12 miles. 2 of those little guys come out and start exploring.
Well, where do we start?
Great Scott!
It's Pop the caretaker. He's dead of an apparent heart attack. But he had a bag of oranges that Mr. Craig, the PR man, had just given him, and they're all over the room as if they'd been thrown. How'd that happen? While Lois calls Mr. Craig to notify him, Clark goes outside to look around and notices the open wellhead. Lois Lane, you are a newspaper reporter. When you see something like that, you're trained to ask questions, not scream like a girl.
They had the bodies of moles and great big human heads. They were just horrible.
Miss Lane, these creatures, I mean, if you really did see them, what were they doing there? What did they want?
Well, the same thing they wanted with the watchman.
Good heavens, you don't think that they
There's
were...
no point in speculating until the coroner's through.
I can tell him what happened here right now. Those creatures killed that poor old man, and they wanted to kill me.
The coroner says without an autopsy, I can't be absolutely sure, but all signs point to a heart attack. Clark asks if he could have been scared to death. If something he saw frightened him enough and he had a bad heart, it could happen. Clark already suspects that the watchman saw the same critters Lois did, but she handled it a bit better than he did. Craig will take Lois back to the hotel, while Clark will stay with Corrigan to keep an eye on the body until it's picked up. Once the others are gone, Clark says, "Okay, it's time to talk. What was in that report and why did you bury those tools? You have a dead watchman, so an inquiry is going to bring it all out anyway."
June the 26th, at 30,000 feet, I took a sample of the stuff that we've been boring through, put it in a test tube, labeled it, and stuck it in the rack. This one. I switched off the lights and started to leave, and then I remembered that I'd left my keys on the table. I turned to get them, and this is what I saw.
He's afraid it's radium, though it could be harmless phosphorescence. He has a friend with a Geiger counter coming out tonight. But the deeper they drilled, the more the stuff glowed, as we can see from the progression of samples. He was afraid if they went any deeper, they'd be drilling through pure radium.
At 32,600 feet, the drill broke through. Broke through what? And it was hanging in midair, as though we'd gone through the last solid layer of the Earth. And after that, nothing.
We can already put this together. There's a phosphorescent cavern down there where these people live. We punched a hole in their ceiling, so they came up through the hole to see what did it. Meanwhile, Corrigan saw something weird on the drill head, so he scraped some off and put it under a microscope.
What are they? I don't know. But whatever they are, they're alive. Well, I thought that all life ceased below the first rock level.
I do find myself wondering who told him that and what the science was based on.
So did everyone else. But these things were alive 6 miles down. Then it's possible there could be other forms of life down there.
Today, we know there are lots more things in heaven and earth than we could have imagined, and we found most of them around the volcanic vents on the ocean floor. 1951 science didn't know any of that, so we have to cut them some slack. Corrigan says there could be whole civilizations down there. And the thing is, now that we've punched a hole through to them, they can come up. As we know, they already have. Corrigan suspects the same thing and is talking about it when the phone rings.
Doc Saunders, a corner. Those creatures. Jeff Regan saw him walking on the road. He was on his way out here to get the body. He lost control of his car and turned over in the ditch.
So they didn't do anything to him. He got frightened and lost control of the car. Just like they apparently didn't do anything to Pop, he saw them and got scared. They also didn't do anything threatening to Lois. She saw them and got scared. I see a pattern forming.
Where was this? Just outside of town. Kent, there's no question about it now. Whatever they are, humans, animals, or monsters, they're here. And they've come up from the center of the Earth. We better be going.
If they go into the town and enough people get scared, it could be bad. Let's hope these guys can head them off. But when Corrigan turns off the lights, they discover that everything these creatures touch ends up glowing. If it's radiation, they could contaminate the entire town.
Hello. Who are you?
They don't speak, but they understand she's not afraid of them and not a threat to them. They come in, and before they know it, they're sitting on the floor rolling that ball back and forth with her. Clark and Corrigan arrive in town just as a man named Luke Benson is gathering a mob. He has his dogs out, too. Clark starts talking everyone down and explaining that everything that's happened has been because humans were frightened, not because the creatures from the well did anything. Benson doesn't want to buy it, but he's losing the group. Mr. Kent is making too much sense.
Why, it's getting prettier. It sort of shines all over. Are you magic?
So much for that. The mob is off to see who screamed.
Well, I hope you realize what a fool you've made of yourself. He always does that. Gets himself in a jam and then runs away.
Well, let's see what's happening outside.
We know what he's doing. I'm not sure that mob does. And I wonder what the barber's going to think of that. Okay, Bill, haircut's done. That'll be $350 plus labor. Understand? That is a nifty effect. In the series, we would see the usual run and jump takeoff that we associate with this Superman. There's less gravity in Silsby since it's hollow underneath, so it doesn't require so much effort for him to take off. Both he and the mob figured out which house the scream came from, but he got there first.
The little girl's all right. She was just scared.
And she wasn't scared until her mother freaked out.
Get out of that doorway.
Put the gun down, Benson.
Oh, put him head first in a trash can, please. While Benson keeps trying in vain to prove he has a privy member, he sends the others to hunt for the creatures. As Lois and the others arrive, the hounds pick up the scent. Benson and the mob take off like the one-tooth hicks they are.
They climbed through this window.
Do you mean they were actually inside the house?
Yes, the child wasn't afraid. It was the mother's screams that frightened her.
You can bet Benson doesn't want to hear anything like that. He's got a good mad going, and by golly, he's going to kill something.
I know what you're thinking. You better wrap the child and their mother in heavy blankets and take them to the hospital at once. There's nothing to do now but wait for routine decontamination.
Decontamination?
Those creatures may be radioactive.
Good grief. That's the one thing Benson and his friends don't know.
Spoiler, they aren't. It's more of the natural phosphorescence that lights their underground home. But Superman and the rest don't know that yet. Lois says, I have to phone this in.
I wouldn't do that if I were you, Miss Lane.
And why not?
You know what'll happen. Screaming headlines, monsters invade Western town.
Look, I'm a newspaper woman, and I have an obligation to report the facts.
But you don't know what the facts are yet. You know some unfamiliar creatures have appeared and triggered a mob mentality in a sleepy little town in wherever this is. Clark said something about going to Dallas, but these people don't sound like any Texans I ever met, so maybe that was a red herring. I don't know, and it was pretty common in these old movies and TV shows to make up a town and put it in some vague part of the country. Just go with it. The noise of the dogs increases. They've trapped the creatures on top of a dam.
You're not going to shoot those little creatures. In the first place, they haven't done you any harm. In the second place, they may be radioactive. If they fall in the reservoir, they may contaminate the water supply. Save your time and ammunition, Benson.
Some guys just never get it.
Clever, quick!
Next morning, that guy was found wearing old Betsy as a suppository. While Superman takes the wounded one to a hospital, we spend a very long time watching Luke, his hounds, and his collection of idiots chase the other one. Finally, it's too tired to run anymore. It won't get much rest because the hounds are harassing it. But at least there's glass in the window now. Good thing it waited until he was through before it appeared. There's no other way out. Apparently the door is boarded up. Benson says, leash the hounds. Yep, that's exactly what he's going to do. They're sure they toasted that thing, and nobody wants to look at its charred carcass. While they head back to town, the creature makes its way back to the wellhead and vanishes.
Here's Luke Benson.
Well, we got both of them.
Both what?
Them critters. Yeah, Weber shot one of them off of the dam. The dogs run the other into a tool shed on the old D&O spur behind the Arroyo. We set the shed afire and burnt it down with him in it.
The sheriff says, then you only got one. Superman caught the other one and took him to the hospital. He's there now. Luke says, round up the boys again. His flunkies head out.
What are you figuring on doing, Luke?
I figure on getting that critter and stringing him up.
You ain't stringing nothing up in this town, Luke, unless it's a slab of bacon.
Who's going to stop me?
Won't need anybody to stop you because you ain't even commencing. Put the bracelets on him, Jim.
Stay where you are.
Yes, he just pulled a gun on the sheriff. As quick as he's gone, the sheriff and his deputy head after him, but there's no way the two of them can stop that mob. Craig and Corrigan take off running to the hospital. Clark Kent is there with the creature. They have to warn him.
That man in the costume.
Superman.
Well, he had no right to bring that monstrosity in here. And you, Dr. Reed, had no right to admit it without my authorization.
I'm sorry, sir, but... You can't blame Dr. Reed. It was an emergency.
Young man, I'm running this hospital.
Have you looked at it? Have you examined it? Have you looked at the chart? Have you asked that doctor about it?
Get that thing out of here immediately.
It's been shot. It might even be dying. You wouldn't treat a dog that way.
This is not a dog hospital. Well, I'm leaving now, but I'll be back in the morning. Don't let me find that thing in here or there'll be trouble.
Unfortunately, as he left the building, the light was dim and he looked enough like one of the creatures that Luke shot him.
But really, it isn't human.
But how do we know?
That's just right. How do we know?
Doctor, would you remove the bullet from his chest?
How can I, Mr. Kent? If it's radioactive, I don't dare get near it.
Oh.
Wait a minute. The lead screen we use in radiotherapy. Miss Ronson.
Oh, no. You don't get me in that operating room.
I'll need an assistant.
I'll assist. Come on.
While that's going on, Luke is whipping up the crowd. He says, this is our town and no strange little critter is going to take it from us. They haven't tried to, but what's that got to do with it?
Luke, Sheriff.
You're under arrest, Benson. If you know what's good for you, Luke, you'll tell him to loose me.
Throw him in a jail, keep him there till we're through. The rest of you, come on, follow me.
If punching the sheriff didn't prove to those guys that what he's doing is wrong, they're too far gone. This is what happens when you start following someone blindly. You start to justify anything they do, whether it's right or not. Beware.
You know, Kent, it's amazing. Its chest structure is exactly like that of a human being. Same thoracic cavity, same number of ribs, same lung position.
Same damage when a bullet tears through it.
The only external difference seems to be in the hairy covering.
In the large head.
They're obviously an offshoot of humanity that somehow wound up living deep underground. But they look different, and that's bad.
Do you know what happened? They shot one of those little monsters.
Dr. Reed just removed the bullet from his chest. He's in there.
In there?
Mm-hmm. Superman brought it to the hospital.
Well, then you know about Superman.
If I don't, who should?
I don't know why he doesn't just come out and tell her. He's dropping enough hints. They start out to find Craig and Corrigan, but there's no need. They're here.
They're coming. Who is? Benson and the mob. The sheriff told Benson that Superman brought one of the creatures to the hospital.
Take it easy.
Benson wants to hang him.
Oh, no.
So, it's turning into a real lynch mob.
They're out for blood. Nothing will stop them now.
I wonder.
Clark, where are you going?
I'll be right back.
He's scared to death. It's pitiful.
If she only knew. But now the question is, if she blocks the door, will they have enough respect for her womanness to back off?
Get her out of the way, Corrigan, before she gets hurt.
Mr. Corrigan doesn't have to get me out of the way. I can get out of the way by myself if I feel like it. But I just don't feel like it. Take your filthy hands off me! Why, you dirty coward!
Get her out of the way!
That would be no. But now someone else is blocking the door.
Don't even try to get in there, Benson. Dr. Reeves in charge tonight. He's left orders that no one's to be admitted.
That's your answer, mister.
It may be an answer to you. It means nothing to me.
Yeah, well, we're running this town. We ought to string you up, too.
You're welcome to try, dude. These guys really are stupid.
All I'm telling you is that little creature in there has as much right to live as you do. Don't forget, you invaded his world. You sank a pipe 6 miles into the ground. And when he climbed up, you set dogs on him, shot him.
Those facts went right over their heads. This is how it is with the rabid hero follower. Facts don't matter. The leader says Superman has 2 heads, therefore he has 2 heads. But that shot almost killed Lois. That's too much for Superman.
Obviously, none of you can be trusted with guns. So I'm going to take them away from you.
Y'all ain't gonna take my gun unless you wants to fight for it. Oh.
What do you do when Superman gets really pissed? Don't get in his way. That night at the wellhead, the other little fellow was back. And he brought coffee. Oh, that's not a coffee urn. It's a weapon of some kind. He also brought 2 friends. They're headed back into town to get their injured friend. Most of the town is gathered at the hotel, presumably to talk about these creatures. One of Luke's groupies spots them, but they make it to the hospital.
What do you want?
He tries to explain that nobody wants to harm them, which is a lie because he knows everybody wants to harm them. The one that was there before makes motions to the others to say that this is the one who caught our friend and carried him away. Superman asks them to wait there and then goes inside.
There's 3 of them in front of the hospital.
You keep everybody back here.
Why did that guy have a gun? Did Superman miss one? The idiot didn't have it cocked. If he had had the presence of mind to do that before he snuck up on them, he might have had a chance. As it was, he gave himself away and they beat him to the draw. You can turn it off now. He's a friend, remember? Luke was so dazed, he thought it was some weird game of leapfrog and stepped in front of Superman.
Go now. No one will harm you. Go back where you belong.
And for heaven's sake, turn that thing off. Thank you. That noise was getting irritating.
You saved my life.
That's more than you deserve.
If there's any justice, his name will become a joke around town. He drove over his own foot. What a Benson. How long do you suppose it takes them to climb 6 miles?
Quick, get back.
That's how they give a middle finger to the surface.
It's almost as if they were saying, you live your lives, and we'll live ours.
It kind of beats you over the head with the message, but in 1951, heads needed beating. We take school integration for granted in most parts of the country today, but that's because of the landmark Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education. And that case wouldn't happen for another 3 years. The entertainment media were calling for change and equality for all, and this is a good example of how they did it. These little mole people are cute, let's face it. Those high eyebrows that make them look like they're always either surprised or scared, the funny way they walk, they're adorable. Meanwhile, Luke is a bigot and an idiot. He's the conspiracy theorist who can rope in all the ignorant sheep, and he does nothing but harm. I kept waiting for him to call for the conquest of the underground world. Isn't that how America came to be in the first place? White people found it by accident, decided they liked it, and took it away from the people who were already there. I was sure Luke was going to demand they do the same thing. I am kind of glad they didn't go there. Lois said it's as though they're saying live and let live, but she's wrong. They're saying, you creatures are insane and violent, and we don't want anything to do with you. And stop poking holes in our ceiling.